Good morning. I don't think I'm awake and my webcam looks... That's fine. Okay, good morning. Welcome to the stream. I don't know about this music yet. Especially because I'm not sure what the theme of the book is. So we may have to change it at some point. But anyways, I think things are looking okay. Okay. So today we're reading Nancy Drew number 15, The Haunted Bridge. Also, I was going through and editing some of the descriptions on my read streams to add like timestamps. Ooh. copies of it, but I thought we would read from 1937. I have the 70s version here. But it seems like people are wanting to hear the original version to compare. But yeah, I was going through my videos and I did hear a noticeable difference in the audio levels. I should have taken note which videos it was from. So something has changed and I don't know what it is because I don't know that I did anything to it. But that is something I will have to talk to Keegan about because I'm not sure how to update all that. So but I am aware of the situation, so I have increased both volumes in hopes that it will level out a little bit, but I apologize if it's too quiet. And I will be working on it. I think the music is okay for now. I think I'm gonna change that timer to settings, duh. We're gonna change it to 30 minutes. Okay, I feel better. I have my tea and a snack. I haven't eaten yet, but I figured I'd do that when there's some downtime if people are around. And it sounded like somebody was mowing. Hopefully it's my stepdad in our yard. So if you hear that in the background, I also apologize. And that is what that is. But our yard desperately needs mowing, so yeah. I hope the audio's okay. I really don't know. All right. This lady has written all over this book. Our name is in it. And then on the back, she's kept track of what book she has.
Sometimes there are things that get me down. They can be hard to deal with. But I try not to worry too much about the things that I can't change. So I just accept them.
Okay, great. Good for you. That was weird. I don't like that. Anyways, and it smells, so that's gonna be fun. Oh, there's a picture right in the front. It looks like a jewel case, Nancy gasped. So that's interesting. Alright, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. This is chapter 1, An Unpleasant Companion. Oh, that was a beautiful drive, Nancy. Your ball must have gone at least 225 yards. George Fane, an attractive girl with a boy's name, followed the flying pellet with her eyes as she spoke. while her cousin, Bess Marvin, added with an envious sigh, "Yes, and straight down the fairway, too. I wish I could drive a golf ball even half that distance." Nancy Drew, a pretty girl in a trim white sports frock, smiled as she started to walk along with her chums. "The game of golf isn't one with a long drive," she remarked modestly. "I've learned never to count my score until the little ball is safe in the cup at the end of the hole." "You've been playing marvelously today," George insisted as she consulted the scorecard. "You'll certainly qualify for the tournament if you don't let your mind wander off on the mystery your father talked about." The three girls were spending a few days at the Deer Mountain Hotel as guests of Nancy's father, Carson Drew, who had been called to the locality on legal business. The fashionable summer resort afforded a decided contrast to the familiar quiet of River Heights, their hometown, and the girls were enjoying every minute of the vacation. Prior to their arrival at the Deer Mountain locality, Mr. Drew had promised his daughter that she might aid him with a troublesome case, which now was absorbing his time. As yet, he had not explained the nature of the work, and during the lawyer's lengthy absences from the hotel, the girls assumed themselves on the golf course. George and Bess thoroughly enjoyed the game. They both played very well, but it was Nancy's scores which had attracted the attention of the golf chairman. The man had urged her to enter the qualifying round of an important tournament to be held that week at the Deer Mountain course. Nancy had demurred, feeling that she could offer little competition to the many excellent women players who frequented the hotel. But her friends had teased her until finally she had consented to try her luck. "You'll most certainly qualify, Nancy," George declared again gleefully. "This is the 16th hole, and only 2 more to go after that." "This is a difficult one," Nancy said dubiously as she regarded the faraway green, where she would finally put her ball in the cup. "Unless I make a perfect shot, I'll go into the woods." The girls were now walking rapidly down the fairway, and as Nancy spoke, her eyes wandered to the dense growth of forest on either side. Presently, Bess and George, coming to their balls, made splendid shots. Nancy then stepped up to her own ball, and with a powerful hit with her spoon club, sent it flying. "Beautiful!" Bess cried excitedly. "Nancy, that was your longest ball of the day!" "And one of my most disastrous, I'm afraid," the Drew girl murmured under her breath, as she saw the tiny white object sailing straight toward the tall trees. "What miserable luck!" Bess squealed in dismay. "Did you see the ball stop, Caddy?" Nancy asked the small, freckled-faced lady, a lad, who was carrying her bag of clubs. He shook his head. "I lost it just at the edge of the woods," he admitted reluctantly, "but I think it went in real deep." "I'm afraid it did," Nancy sighed. "We'll find your ball so you won't have to take a penalty," George said confidently as the three girls walked toward the woods. "I hope we do," Nancy replied soberly. "I can't really afford to lose even a single stroke if I'm to qualify for the tournament." A 5-minute search in the tall grass at the edge of the fairway did not reveal the missing ball. "I'm certain it went deeper into the woods," Nancy Drew remarked with a troubled frown. "There seems to be a ravine back there." The music seems louder than you are. Okay, thank you. Hopefully that's better. Let me know. If it ever reached the edge of the ravine, it's gone forever, George admitted ruefully. "What possesses our caddies anyway? Why aren't they over here helping to look for the ball?" The three boys had walked on toward the green. "What good is a caddy if he doesn't help one find lost balls?" Bess added a trifle crossly. She motioned to the boys to approach, but only Nancy's caddy reluctantly obeyed the signal. "Don't you think you might help us look for my lost ball?" Nancy gently reproved the lad. "I'm afraid it went over toward the ravine." "Then there's no use searching for it," the boy answered, lingering at the edge of the woods. Nancy felt a trifle provoked. After all, you're being paid to keep track of my ball, she said sternly. I'd not go into that woods if you'd give me $1 million. Why? Nancy asked, gazing at the boy in surprise. Are you afraid of snakes? Snakes and worse things. What could be worse than a big ugly snake? Bess questioned with a shudder. Ghosts, came the boy's unexpected reply. Ghosts? Nancy exclaimed and laughed. Well, I'm sure there can't be any ghosts around here. What are you afraid of anyway? The caddy gazed intently toward the ravine as he answered in a voice scarcely above a whisper. The haunted bridge. That's what I'm afraid of, and so are the other boys. You couldn't hire one of them to go near that place. Nancy regarded the caddy incredulously. She scarcely could believe that she had heard correctly, yet she knew that the little fellow meant his words seriously, for his face mirrored fear. A haunted bridge? George exclaimed before either of her chums could offer a comment. Well, now that's something new. I've heard of haunted houses. Girls, we're holding up a foursome directly behind us, Bess interrupted, glancing back over her shoulder. Shall I signal them to drive through? No, we may as well go on, Nancy decided quickly, or we'll be forever getting back to the hotel. I'll give up my ball as lost. That's the best way, the caddy declared in obvious relief. You couldn't have played it from behind all those trees anyway. It's a shame, George commented regretfully as the girls hastened on again. You had such a splendid score up to here, and now this trouble will cost you a stroke. I hate to see you have to add a point. Nancy's thoughts were upon the remark made by her caddy. She meant to learn more from him about the haunted bridge. She would question the lad as soon as the round should be over. For a few minutes she did not keep her mind on the game, with the result that her score for the hole was 6. Oh, you should have had a 4, George murmured sympathetically. Still thinking of the lost ball, Nancy played the next hole rather carelessly, a fact which worried her chums. As the girls walked toward the 18th tee, they noticed that another player was there ahead of them. He was a tall, thin man in his late 20s, immaculately dressed in white slacks, with his sleek black hair plastered back from an angular, hard face. Oh, he's Mortimer Bartescue, Nancy said in an undertone. Let's slow up, girls. The warning was spoken too late. The man had seen the girls. He waved and waited for them to approach. Such luck, Bess commented in disgust. We would have to meet him. Mortimer Bartescue had been presented to the girls the previous evening at the hotel, and immediately he had tried to make a golfing engagement with Nancy. Although she had heard the man was a very good player, she had found an excuse for refusing the invitation, for she had taken a dislike to him. Obviously he was a braggart, and she rather distrusted his claim that he came from an excellent family. Now, as the girls seated themselves on a bench directly behind the teeing ground, he smiled affably. May I have the honor of playing in with you young ladies? He inquired engagingly, directing his smile toward Nancy. The girls felt that they must be civil to the man, whose only real offense so far had been that he had been too friendly. Yes, we may as well all walk in together, Nancy replied politely, but with no warmth in her voice. She drove a straight ball, while Bess and George played somewhat shorter ones down the fairway. As the group moved along, Mortimer Bartescue attached himself to Nancy. You play a fine game, Miss Drew, he praised. I've never seen a girl with such a pretty swing, or for that matter. Thank you, Nancy said quickly, fearing a more personal comment. I was just thinking that you might like to enter the mixed foursome tournament with me next week. The man went on after a slight pause. Together we should win first place, for I'm a pretty good golfer. I may not be here next week, Nancy declined a trifle coldly. I've played golf courses all over the world, the man continued in a boasting tone. Once I played the Prince of Wales. Indeed, and did you defeat him? Nancy asked, trying to hide a smile. Well, yes, I did, the man admitted with a show of modesty, but only by a couple of strokes. Oh yes, I've often played with royalty. By this time, Nancy had reached her ball. As she was about to hit it, Mortimer moved a trifle close, and as she took her backswing, Nancy let her mind momentarily switch to him. As a result, she dubbed the shot. Too bad, the man muttered sympathetically. You drew in your elbow just as you struck the ball. Here, let me show you. Hi, Boo. He took the club from the girl's hand and, to the annoyance of the three chums, insisted upon giving a demonstration of what he considered to be Nancy's fault. She said nothing, but a moment later, completely disregarding Bardescu's advice, walked to her ball and played a splendid shot. That's the way, Mortimer nodded. You'll make a 5, the way the professionals do. I haven't made it yet, Nancy said somewhat testily and did not speak again. Finally, her ball was only 5 feet from the cup. Intensely annoyed because the man was still with her and still talking, she stepped up to putt. The shot was perfectly played, but at the very edge of the hole, the ball stopped. Oh, Nancy, did you ever? Bess wailed. Mortimer Bardescu immediately jumped up and down on the ground, causing the ball to drop into the cup. There, Miss Drew, you're 5. That really wasn't fair, Nancy said severely. I shall count that as an extra putt, which gives me a 6. But I don't see why you didn't strike the ball. Nancy and her chum smiled coldly and, murmuring a few polite phrases, walked to the hotel, leaving the man to stare blankly after them. Of all the conceited people, he's by far the worst I've ever met, Bess exclaimed when they were beyond Bardescu's hearing. I'll venture to say he never came within a mile of royalty, to say nothing of defeating the Prince of Wales by 2 strokes. And he made you miss your shot, Nancy, George added irritably. Oh, it's a shame your score had to be ruined on the last 2 holes. You'll surely qualify anyway, Bess said as she studied the card. George has 102. My score is a disgraceful 120, but Nancy has a brilliant 93. Did I really do that well? The girl asked in surprise. It's just perfectly grand, Bess insisted. George and I will attest to your score, and then you can turn it in. Mortimer Bardescu had followed the girls, but as they saw him coming toward them, they hastily slipped out on the veranda. I wonder what became of my caddy, Nancy asked, looking about. I meant to talk to him when I paid him. About the haunted bridge in the woods? Bess inquired. I suppose you'll want to inspect it. Well, if there's anything spooky about it, count me out on an investigation. I'd like to make further inquiries about the whole thing, came Nancy's reply. That certainly is the proper way to approach a mystery, George added. Do you think there's anything to what the caddy said? He looked genuinely frightened when he spoke of entering the woods, Nancy said musingly. So I believe there is something to it. I'm going to locate that boy and probe into the mystery of the haunted bridge. It's the end of chapter 1. What are you doing, boo-boo? You get out of bed? Come see me? Boy, find my balls! What could be worse than big ugly snakes? Ghost snakes! That's a normal name. Morty Barbecue. Good old pretty swings. Nancy asked about the haunted bridge game. I'd missed the putt too. It okay, Nancy. I've met too many people worse than Morty. Welcome for clapping. Thank you for being here. How are you? How's your morning? Is the music okay now? Should I lower it anymore? Okay, thank you. There's a bunch of stuff in my keyboard. The morning is okay. How are you? I'm alright. I'm hungry. I have a massage today, so that's cool. I haven't had one in quite a while. I feel like there are a bunch of things I'm gonna say, but I don't remember. Remembering was overrated. Twix opted to bring a bun she was given recently into my bed. Thanks, Twix. Hi, Twix. What kind of bun? Hot dog bun? I feel like there's just like this random hair. Yep. Whatever. Okay, shall we continue? The chapter 2. Sammy's story. Before the girls had an opportunity to search for Nancy's missing caddy, Mortimer Bardescu strode out upon the veranda. "Oh, here you are," he said gaily. "I've been looking for you everywhere. I'd like you to take tea with me on the terrace." "Thank you, but I haven't time just now," Nancy said quickly. "I must find my caddy." "I'll go with you," the man began, but Nancy pretended not to hear him. She fled from the veranda, leaving Bess and George to think up their own excuses for escaping the objectionable Mr. Bardescu. Nancy retraced her steps to the 18th green. Though several of the caddies were lingering nearby, the little fellow who had carried her clubs was nowhere to be seen. She questioned another boy regarding him. "Sammy Sutter caddied for you," she was told. "He's just starting out with a twosome. You might catch him at the first tee." Nancy thanked the lad and hastened to the other part of the course, which was hidden from her view by a wing of the Deer Mountain Hotel. 2 men had just driven balls. As she approached them, she observed Sammy starting down the fairway, heavily burdened under the weight of a huge leather bag. "Oh, Sammy, just a minute," Nancy hailed the boy. "I want to speak with you." The caddy obediently halted, although he glanced somewhat nervously toward the portly gentleman whose clubs he was carrying. "I forgot to pay you for your work this afternoon," Nancy said with a warm smile, taking some money from her pocket. "I want to ask you about that haunted bridge, too." "I can't stop to talk now," Sammy replied, shifting his weight uneasily. "I understand, but will you meet me near the caddy house after you have finished your work?" Nancy requested. "I'll be there about 4 o'clock. "I won't be able to make it that soon. I can tell these men will be slow." "Make it 5 o'clock then. You'll not fail me, will you, Sammy?" "No, I'll wait for you," the boy soberly promised. He hurried off, and Nancy slowly made her way back to the hotel veranda, where she found her chum still in the company of Mortimer Bardescu. The man had been entertaining Bess and George with an account of the many famous and socially prominent persons with whom he claimed to be acquainted. "I believe I'll turn my scorecard into the tournament chairman now," Nancy remarked to the girls, "if one of you will attest it." "Here, allow me," interrupted Mr. Bardescu. Before Nancy could prevent him, he had taken the scorecard and carefully written his name at the bottom. The act provoked the girl, but of course she could not very well protest. As Mr. Bardescu inscribed his name, she noted a rather curious thing. It seemed to her that he formed each letter of his signature with painful precision, but she pretended not to notice this. Nancy took the card. Then, accompanied by her chums, she offered it to the tournament chairman, who was busy charting up the results of the day's matches on a large sheet of white cardboard. "A very fine score, Miss Drew," he praised her as he glanced at the card. "Will she qualify for the tournament, do you think?" Bess questioned the man eagerly. "She certainly will, unless better scores come in tomorrow," he replied with a smile. "However, I don't believe the competition has ever been as keen as it is this year. Some of the best women golfers in the state are entering the tournament." I'll feel very fortunate if I so much as qualify," Nancy replied. "I understand there is to be a tournament for men, too." "Yes, I have entered it," said a voice behind the girls. They turned to find Bardescu standing there. "So far, my score is the lowest turned in," he added. "That's splendid," Nancy muttered indifferently, hurrying away with her chums. As the elevator carried the girls to their rooms on the 4th floor, Bess and George slyly teased Nancy about her new admirer. "I dislike his type, and you both know it," the Drew girl replied spiritedly. "But I must confess, there was a certain something about him which captured my interest." "His sleek black hair?" Bess giggled wickedly. "Don't be silly, Bess. That fellow looks like one of those wax models one sees in store windows. But I was interested in the way he signed my scorecard. Did you notice how unnaturally he wrote his signature, as if he were trying to disguise his usual style of writing?" "Why, no," George admitted in surprise. "You seem to observe everything, Nancy." "I guess that's why she has solved so many baffling mysteries," Bess sighed enviously. "Nancy knows how to make use of her eyes, and we don't." "I think Dad trained me to be observing," Nancy said modestly. The girl was justly proud of her father, Carson Drew, whose fame as a criminal lawyer had spread over many states. In a slightly different way, Nancy herself had achieved distinction, for she was a noted amateur detective, with a long list of successful mystery cases to her credit. Nancy had never intended to become a detective. Rather, the role of investigator had been thrust upon her when her father, puzzled about some details of one of his difficult cases, had permitted his daughter to assist him. Nancy had gone to work with a will, amazing everyone by her skill and cleverness in solving the secret of the old clock. After that, Mr. Drew was only too glad to have her help with other baffling cases. Nancy's adventures soon embraced many fields, but some of those which she liked best to recall had taken her to such picturesque locations as Redgate Farm, Lilac Inn, Shadow Ranch, and Larkspur Lane. Recently, she and her chums had uncovered a strange tale which centered about a queer old abandoned mansion at Seacliff. There, the girls located a striking marble statue which many persons claimed actually resembled Nancy Drew. In solving the mystery surrounding it, they were instrumental in reuniting a married couple who had been separated years before. Nancy was an only child, but the fact that she had neither sisters nor brothers had never tended to make her selfish. She was generous to a fault, and probably was the most popular young person in River Heights. Since the death of her mother, Nancy and her father had lived alone with only Mrs. Gruen, their faithful housekeeper. By the way, did you learn anything about the haunted bridge? George asked after the girls were in their rooms. Not yet, Nancy answered, glancing at her wristwatch. But I have an appointment to talk with Sammy, the caddy, at 5. I hope to hear the entire story then. It was already fairly late in the afternoon, and by the time the girls had taken showers, and Nancy had discarded her crumpled sports dress for a cool linen, she discovered that she would have to hurry if she hoped to reach the caddy house at the appointed hour. Sammy awaited her there, offering no comment as the girl led him to a bench at the rear of the hotel. Now tell me everything about the haunted bridge, he urged, trying not to appear too eager. Why do you say that it's haunted, Sammy? Because it is, the boy insisted grimly. All of the caddies will tell you the same thing. Sometimes you can see the ghost walking over the bridge. At night, you mean? Daytime, too. It waves its arms slowly up and down. Have you witnessed this sight yourself, Sammy? Sure. That's why I know better than to go into that woods. You mean you've never investigated the ghost at close range? Nancy inquired with a smile. You couldn't hire any of the boys to go near the bridge. Once Pete Dalton started down there, but before he was halfway in, he fell over a stone and broke his leg. After that, the other fellows stayed away. Yeah, you already said that. I don't believe in ghosts myself, Sammy. You'd believe in this one all right if you could hear it groaning. Sometimes it screams as if it were in pain. It's enough to give a fellow the shivers. I don't even like to walk down number 16 Fairway anymore. Tell me, is the bridge and the surrounding property owned by the hotel? Nancy questioned. Before Sammy could reply, the caddy master appeared and called to the boy that he was wanted immediately. I'll have to go now, Sammy told Nancy hurriedly. Thank you for telling me about the ghost, she returned. And by the way, would you like to caddy for me in the tournament day after tomorrow? Sure, the lad agreed with a broad grin. But I won't promise to look for any balls in the woods. After Sammy had returned to the caddy house, Nancy leisurely walked back to the hotel. As she went through the lobby, a sudden thought occurred to her, and impulsively she turned to speak with the clerk at the desk. May I please look through the hotel register? She requested. Certainly! Would not happen anymore. The man pushed the book across the desk toward her. Nancy scanned several pages until she came upon the name which she sought, that of Mortimer Bartescue. Thoughtfully, she studied the man's handwriting. It's not a bit like the way he wrote his name on my scorecard, she reflected. Obviously, he disguised his signature. Yet, why should he wish to do so? Nancy was so absorbed in looking at the register that she failed to observe Mortimer Bartescue, who had come up directly behind her. Pausing, the man regarded her intently for a moment. Then, without speaking, he dodged back into the telephone booth. Without the slightest suspicion that her action had been witnessed, Nancy presently rejoined her chums upstairs. Bess and George were dressing for dinner, but they were not too occupied to bombard Nancy with questions concerning the haunted bridge. She told them everything she had learned, but refrained from voicing her suspicions regarding Mortimer Bardescu. Carson Drew dined with the girls that evening, but Nancy noticed that he seemed more preoccupied than usual. "Isn't your case progressing well, Dad?" she questioned him anxiously. "Not very well so far," he replied. "But I have high hopes that things will begin to break my way soon. I'll probably need your help presently, Nancy." "I hope so, Dad. I'm ready to go to work whenever you say." After dinner, Mr. Drew told the girls that he must absent himself from the hotel for a few hours. "We'll manage to amuse ourselves," Nancy laughed. "There's to be a dance here this evening." The hotel orchestra was an excellent one. The chums met many attractive young men who were vacationing at Deer Mountain. Nancy was never at a loss for a partner, and usually before a dance was finished, someone cut in. Mortimer Bardescu was a persistent offender in this respect, and though he was an excellent dancer, Nancy did not care for his company. "You are by far the most charming girl here this evening," the man said flatteringly as the music ended for one number. He firmly steered Nancy toward the veranda. She was upon the verge of dismissing him rather curtly when it occurred to her that she might be overlooking an opportunity to glean a few facts of interest regarding the man. He liked nothing better than to talk about himself, and by cleverly leading up to the subject of handwriting, Nancy thought that she might induce Mortimer Bardescu to admit that he had disguised his signature. Accordingly, she offered no objection as the man guided her out of the crowded ballroom to the cool veranda. He immediately launched into a story of his adventures in England, but at the first opportunity, Nancy switched to the subject which was of interest to her. In the semi-darkness, she did not notice her companion regard her shrewdly. Certainly, she had no suspicion that he was fully aware of her purpose in bringing up the topic of handwriting. "I've often thought that the study of graphology would be interesting," Nancy said lightly. "Some persons profess to be able to tell a person's character by means of his handwriting." "What an interesting tale could be built up around mine," Mr. Bardescu replied with a soft chuckle. "But I fear my personality would vary with my signature." Isn't one's handwriting always the same?" "The way I write varies with my moods. This afternoon your charm had me so baffled I could hardly write my name at all. I doubt that I would even recognize it on your scorecard." Nancy glanced quickly at the man, but his face was a perfect mask. She could not read what was in his mind. "I wish you wouldn't keep speaking of my charm, as you call it," the girl said in a nettled tone. "It really embarrasses me." "But Miss Drew, you are so very attractive," the man insisted, moving closer. "In all my life, I've never met anyone like you." Nancy took a step backward. She did not realize that she had been standing very close to the edge of the veranda. Suddenly her heels were no longer on solid cement, and she felt herself falling. With a startled outcry, she sought to recover her balance, but it was too late. Before Mortimer Bardescu could extend a hand to save her, she had toppled into a flower bed. "Miss Drew, are you hurt?" the man called anxiously, springing down from the porch to assist her. Nancy slowly arose from the ground, trying to brush the dirt from her evening dress. "I sprained my hand," she admitted, fighting to keep back the tears. To herself, she said, "Oh dear, I hope this stupid fall won't mean that I'll be out of the golf tournament, or that I can't help Dad on his case." End of Chapter 2. These chapters seem really long. People seem afflicted by random hair lately. Never has been as keen. "Do my work for me, daughter," Carson Drew. Father of the Year. Ah, how awful living alone together with two other people. They stayed away because Pete Dalton was a dumb. Sure, I'll work for you, but I won't do my job. Nancy's always wanted as a dance partner. Listen, Morty, shut up. Let's talk graphology. Welcome for clapping. I guess Boo left. Oh yeah, on the follower count. So Monday or whenever it was that I streamed, I had 146 followers, right? Now I have 145. So we're going backwards. There should be a reward for going backwards, right? Because that's the trend that I'm on. Ooh, off on an adventure. I don't know if people on Twitch like read streams, but they seem to be okay on YouTube. So. Okay, sorry. I go backwards often, follower-wise. It's pretty annoying. Sorry, somebody sent me something that I need to look at, apparently. Yeah, I noticed and just chuckle. How am I doing on my music? I'm about to run out of music, so let me... How about this?
Writing's not.
No ads, please. That'll work. Okay, shall we do chapter 3? The injured hand. Wow, that sounds pretty ominous. Okay. Attracted by Nancy's first cry of alarm, several persons came running from the hotel ballroom to learn what was wrong. The situation was intensely embarrassing to the girl, who could not very well explain that she had fallen from the veranda because she had been trying to avoid Mortimer Bartescue's unwelcome attentions. Nancy was furious at the man, and it required a great deal of willpower on her part to keep from speaking sharply to him. If she were unable to play in the tournament or be of help to her father, it would be entirely his fault. "Let me see the bruise," Bartescue urged. "I don't believe it's a very bad one." "How would you know? You're not a doctor." Nancy ignored him completely, and walking swiftly away, went directly to her room. The pain in her left hand was not so intense now, but she could feel the fingers growing stiff. "I'll never be able to play," she thought miserably. Sometimes it takes weeks for a sprain to get well. While Nancy was in the bathroom, trying to doctor her hand, Bess and George came hurrying into the room. "Oh, Nancy," the latter wailed. "We just heard about your accident. Mortimer Bartescue said you weren't hurt, but you are." "Let me see the injury, Nancy," Bess cried. "There's nothing to see. The skin isn't even broken. But I can assure you it hurts." "You must go straight to a doctor," George urged. "I'm afraid it's too late. The damage is done." "Someone should push that Bartescue man off the porch," George said crossly. "My, how I detest that conceited prig." When Carson Drew returned to the hotel 20 minutes later, he too became concerned over his daughter's injury, particularly when she admitted that the fall had twisted her back slightly. "Now don't be foolish, Nancy," he said severely. "I'm going to have the house physician come up here to look at you. After all, you want to play in that golf tournament, don't you?" "Yes," Nancy answered meekly. Dr. Ackerman was a quiet, dignified man who had very little to say. However, the few words which he spoke after his examination were directly to the point. "This sprain isn't serious, but you must give your hand a rest. I'll wrap it up for you, and you're to leave it entirely alone for 3 or 4 days." "You mean I'm not to play any golf?" "No golf." "But doctor," the girl's voice became pleading, "it really doesn't hurt very much, and the tournament starts day after tomorrow." "Nancy has a very good chance to win, we think," Bess interposed helpfully. "Well," the doctor wavered as he studied Nancy with twinkling eyes, "I can see that you are a very determined young lady. I suppose you could play, although at the moment I advise against it. However, I may alter my opinion by tomorrow night." Dr. Ackerman picked up his black bag from the table. "I might suggest a body massage to prevent your muscles from becoming stiff. I feel that's about the only thing that will help you." The idea of a massage rather appealed to Nancy, who felt battered and sore. After the physician had gone, she consulted the hotel directory to see if a masseuse were available. Although one was listed, she did not answer her phone. "Bess and I could give you a good rub," George volunteered. "Did you ever give such a treatment?" Nancy asked dubiously. "No," her chum admitted frankly. "I never did, but there's absolutely nothing to it. You just locate the various muscles and then rub until all the soreness is gone." Nancy allowed herself to be persuaded. Obediently, she stretched herself full length on the bed. "Where do you hurt the most?" George inquired sympathetically as she rolled up her sleeves, ready to begin her labors. "Everywhere," Nancy groaned. "Oh, don't rub in that spot, please, George. It's too tender." "I have to massage the muscles," the Fane girl insisted. "Stimulating the circulation will do a lot of good, and in the morning you'll feel ever so much better." "Where did you get that bottle of liniment?" Nancy demanded suspiciously. "It has a dreadful odor." "Say, this is a free massage, so don't be so critical," Bess laughed. "Put on plenty of liniment, George. It will help to take out the soreness." George picked up the bottle, but as she attempted to pour a little of the fluid in the palm of her hand, the container slipped from her fingers, allowing at least half of the liniment to run into Nancy's hair. "Now I'll have to have a shampoo as well as a massage," the girl on the bedside. "I suggest we abandon the entire project." "I'll be more careful," George promised contritely as she sopped up the liquid with a bath towel. "I don't know how that bottle slipped from my hand." "My, that liniment must be very strong," Bess observed in awe as she gazed down at a trickle which had run on the floor. "It seems to be eating a hole in the rug." "And I can feel it burning a great big one in my scalp, too," Nancy insisted. "Get some water and sponge me off before all my hair is eaten away." Bess and George rushed frantically to the bathroom, where for several minutes they were in a panic lest their chum's lovely golden hair had been harmed. Presently, however, the effects of the liniment no longer caused any smarting, and after deciding that no real damage had been done, Nancy reluctantly allowed the massage to proceed. Bess relieved George when the latter grew weary of her task. There was no rest or relaxation for poor Nancy. She was pummeled and pounded by her well-meaning but inexperienced chums until she felt ready to cry from sheer exhaustion. "Oh, girls, I can't stand anymore," she pleaded finally. "Just let me crawl under the covers and go to sleep." "We're through now anyway," Bess declared as she helped Nancy roll over on her back again. "In the morning you'll feel fine." "I hope so," the girl groaned. She closed her eyes, but before George could snap out the light, the telephone rang. "It's probably Dad, wanting to know how I feel," Nancy murmured drowsily. Bess answered the call. It's for you, Nancy. A long-distance one from River Heights. I wonder if anything has gone wrong at home, Nancy said anxiously as she painfully pulled herself to a sitting position. Bess brought the telephone to the bedside. A familiar voice at the other end of the line said cheerily, "Hello, Nancy? This is Ned Nickerson. Can you hear me?" "Perfectly, Ned." "Your voice doesn't sound natural somehow," the young man complained. "I guess maybe I shouldn't have bothered you so late at night, but I thought probably you weren't having a very exciting time at Deer Mountain and would like to hear from an old friend." "Of course I wanted to hear from you," Nancy said cordially, "but you're entirely wrong about there being no excitement at Deer Mountain." She then told him about the haunted bridge, her unpleasant experience with Mortimer Bardescu, and finally of her misfortune in tumbling off the veranda. "Say, I'd like to give that fellow a good punch in the jaw," Ned replied angrily. "You can't very well do it by long distance," Nancy laughed. "No, but you may be seeing me sooner than you expect. In fact, that's my real reason for calling. I thought if you were planning on staying at the hotel over the weekend, I might drive over with a couple friends." "Oh, that would be grand, Ned. And before you come, will you do me a special favor?" "Anything." "I want you to look in the social register and see if Mortimer Bardescu's name is there. He claims to come from a fine family, and I'm very curious to learn if he's telling the truth." "Say, I hope you're not getting interested in that fellow." "Now don't become alarmed, Ned," Nancy laughed. "Will you look up his name for me?" "Sure thing," Ned promised, "and I'll wager it won't be there." A few minutes later, Nancy put down the receiver, for she was very tired. George and Bess were eager to learn about the boys who were to come to Deer Mountain with Ned, but observing that their chum was too wearied to talk, they turned out the lights and tiptoed away to their own room, which was adjoining. In the morning, Nancy awoke feeling greatly refreshed. Her back was not as sore as she had expected it would be, though her hands still pained her. "Will you be able to play in the tournament, do you think?" George asked anxiously as she helped Nancy fasten her dress. "One finger is practically useless, it's so stiff, but I certainly shall play if the doctor says I may. I'm glad I wasn't hurt so badly I couldn't help Dad." "Even if you do play, you'll be greatly handicapped," said Bess, who was always more interested in things which did not smack of mystery. The girls had just finished dressing when a telephone call came from Mr. Drew, who wished to learn how his daughter was feeling. If you would enjoy it, I'd like to have you take an automobile ride with me this morning." "Of course I feel equal to the trip," Nancy answered promptly, for a certain sense of intuition warned her that the ride might have something to do with the mysterious case upon which her father was working. "We'll be down to breakfast in 5 minutes." The girls were just ready to leave their rooms when a messenger boy appeared with a box of flowers for Nancy. At first she assumed that her father had sent them, but as she tore away the tissue paper from the huge bouquet of scarlet roses, a card dropped to the floor. "Mortimer Bardescu!" Nancy exclaimed as she read the name. She tossed the flowers carelessly on the bed, whereupon Bess promptly rescued them. "Even if you don't like the man, don't ruin the flowers," she reprimanded. "I've never seen more gorgeous roses." "They are pretty," Nancy admitted reluctantly. "I suppose he sent them because he feels responsible for me falling off the veranda." "Wear one of the roses down to breakfast," George suggested, selecting a blossom from the vase which Bess was arranging. "No, that would flatter the man too highly, but you girls are welcome to them." As George and Bess pinned flowers to their dresses, Nancy went over to the table and picked up Bardescu's card once more. Turning it over, she saw that he had written a brief note of sympathy on the back. "Girls, look at the handwriting," she requested suddenly. "What's wrong with it?" Bess asked, peering over her chum's shoulder. "Does it look like the man's handwriting?" "It doesn't appear to be the same signature that he attached to your scorecard. And it's not the same as the way he signed his name in the hotel register either." "How do you know that, Nancy?" George inquired quickly. "Because I looked to see. I can't help feeling there's something suspicious about Mortimer Bardescu. Why should he try to disguise his handwriting?" Nancy knew that her father was waiting for her in the lobby, so she dropped the little card into her purse and opened the door. The three girls hurriedly locked their rooms and went downstairs. Directly after breakfast, Nancy and Mr. Drew drove away from the hotel together, leaving Bess and George to occupy themselves with tennis and letter writing. Sorry. Not until the car was some distance from the little summer resort community did the lawyer speak of the matter uppermost in his mind. He then revealed to Nancy that for the past week he had been working upon the legal angles of a smuggling case, one which had baffled New York detectives. For many months, the authorities had been trying to break up a daring gang of jewel thieves, he explained. It is believed that one of the members is a woman who frequents the summer resort hotels in this particular locality. Unfortunately, no description of her is available. Then how can you hope to trace her, Dad? The assignment is a difficult one, I know, but it happens there is one good clue. And what is that? The woman always carries an expensive jeweled vanity case, one set with diamonds and precious stones. In the back of the case is a picture of a child. Her own? I can't answer that question, Nancy. Very little is known of this woman. And you say she frequents the better hotels near here? Yes. For days, a certain woman detective who works with me has been making around searching for her. Miss Ingle has been taken ill and will be in hospital for at least a week. That brings me to the point I've been approaching, Nancy. How would you like to take Miss Ingle's place until she is well again? I'd love it, Nancy cried promptly. Parson Drew nodded approvingly. He had been certain that his daughter would give an enthusiastic answer. When do I start work? Nancy questioned eagerly. This morning, her father replied with a smile, as he turned the car into a curving side road which led toward an imposing hotel overlooking a high cliff. In just a moment now, you will receive your first assignment. End of chapter 3. Hello, Lexi. How are you? Good to see you. Nancy, get out of here before George just outright sets you on fire by accident. I bet you're bored. I missed your excitement. Yeah. I keep losing followers. On Monday it was 146, and today it was 145, so. I was looking at old videos, and I think I've had this follower goal up for a long time. Probably, well over a year, so that's fun. That was Ned's greeting, basically. He called and assumed everything was boring, and he'd make it more exciting. This is true. I need to take a quick bathroom break. That was just an odd thing to see when I entered the stream. Yeah, I'm sorry. That's what it is, though. And I will be right back. Please hold. Hello, I have returned. You meant the Ned thing. Oh, don't worry about it. Ned and excitement don't typically belong in the same sentence. You saying he's not exciting? Good old Ned. I feel like my vocal cords are not warmed up properly. I keep getting things like stuck in my throat. Shall we continue with chapter 4? Nancy's assignment. Ned jumped from 0 to wanting to assault pretty fast. That's true. That is some excitement. Just not in the way you might expect or want, I guess. Alright, so chapter 4. Mr. Drew parked his automobile on the grounds of the Hotel Lincoln, and as he walked slowly toward the entrance with his daughter, explained what he wished her to do. Your work is very simple, Nancy. While I interview the hotel clerk, you are to wander about the lobby, especially the ladies' lounge, keeping an ever-alert watch for a woman who might be a member of the Jewel Thief Gang. I'll also look in the powder room, Nancy promised. A woman naturally would make use of her vanity case there. Carson Drew nodded approvingly. They had reached the entrance of the hotel. We'll separate now, he advised. I'll meet you in half an hour at the car. The lobby was fairly crowded, for it was the busy season, and in this fashionable hostelry, rooms were engaged months in advance. Nancy attracted no attention as she seated herself near the elevator, where she might obtain a glimpse of those who entered and left. Presently, satisfied that the woman she sought was not on the main floor, Nancy went upstairs to loiter about in the ladies' lounge. She saw several women take vanity cases from their bags, but the little powder containers were of the plainest types. At length, the clock warned Nancy that she must return to the car to meet her father. She was there a few minutes ahead of him. No luck? Mr. Drew inquired, noting the expression on her face. Absolutely none. Oh well, we're only beginning our search, Mr. Drew responded cheerfully as he started the car engine. An investigator's work is always tedious. A few miles farther down the road, the lawyer turned in at the grounds of Hemlock Hall, a hotel which was even larger and more exclusive than the Lincoln. I suppose I'm to do the same thing here? Nancy inquired as she alighted beside her father. Yes, we'll meet at the car as before. In the crowded lobby of Hemlock Hall, Nancy soon lost sight of her father. She became completely absorbed in her task of studying the various women guests, and so was a trifle dismayed when she glanced at her wristwatch some minutes later and saw that she must hurry if she were not to keep her father waiting. I've not even visited the powder room, she thought. I'll just run up there for an instant before I rejoin Dad. The ladies' dressing room was deserted, save for the colored maid and an attractive-looking woman in her early 20s. Nancy gazed at her intently and immediately was impressed by the sad expression on her face. She can't be the person I'm after, the girl reflected, but one can tell she's had plenty of trouble in her lifetime, even if she is young. Nancy made a pretense of arranging her hair before the mirror. Her eyes were not upon her own reflection, however, but focused themselves upon the woman who sat nearby, powdering her face. Then Nancy very nearly dropped the comb in her hand, for she saw the other take from her beaded bag a beautiful vanity case which was set with sparkling gems. The Drew girl had never seen anything like it before, and instantly her heart leaped with excitement. Could it be that she had found the person for whom her father was searching? The woman raised her eyes, flushing slightly as she became aware of Nancy's stare. I beg your pardon, the girl said, thinking quickly. I don't mean to be rude, but I couldn't help admiring your vanity case. I've never seen one like it. Yes, it is pretty, the other agreed. The case is one of my choicest possessions. She casually offered it to Nancy for closer inspection. With trembling fingers, the girl unfastened the catch. Would the case contain the picture of a child? With mingled feelings of relief and disappointment, Nancy saw that the back cover was bare. It had not seemed possible to her that this dignified, quiet young woman could be a member of a disreputable gang. Now she felt certain that the jeweled case had no significance. Yet there was a chance that this person, aware she was being sought, had removed the picture. After offering a few admiring comments, Nancy returned the case, venturing to ask the woman if she were a guest at the hotel. "No, I am not," the other admitted. "I came to take dinner with a friend. I suppose you are spending your vacation here." Nancy was compelled to give a negative reply. She remarked that she was staying at the Deer Mountain Hotel. "Why, I formerly lived only a short distance from that place," the woman returned in surprise. "A lovely locality. My home was destroyed by fire." Okay, why are they saying locality 50 billion times? And that's really like, just throw it out there. My home was destroyed by a fire. Before Nancy could inquire as to the exact location of the house or the name of the woman, the latter arose. Then, replacing the vanity case in her bag, she left the dressing room. "My house was destroyed by a fire. Bye!" The girl was tempted to follow her, but decided against this since she could think of no pretext for reopening the conversation. Instead, she went to the car and found her father waiting for her. "You're late, Nancy," he chided. "I'm afraid we'll not have time to visit another hotel, for I must get back to Deer Mountain for an important interview." "I'm sorry I kept you waiting, Dad. I'd not have done it, only I thought I had located the woman we were looking for." She then gave a detailed description of the jeweled case which had attracted her attention. Mr. Drew, after hearing an account of the entire conversation, was inclined to agree with her that the woman probably had no connection with the smuggling case, but he did not blame his daughter for prolonging her hotel stay. "Every clue is worth investigating," he assured her, "and it's barely possible this woman may not be as innocent as she pretends. You didn't inquire her name?" "I had no opportunity. She told me she formerly lived near our hotel, but that her home had burned." "I'll make further inquiry when we return," Mr. Drew declared. He glanced at his watch. "We must be starting back too, or I'll be late for my appointment." "I'm afraid I wasn't much help today, Dad." "Quite the contrary, Nancy," her father praised. "You did splendidly. I didn't expect to solve the case in one morning, you know." At the Deer Mountain Hotel, they parted company, and Nancy sought her chums, who were resting in their room after several hours of vigorous exercise on the tennis courts. "You were gone such a long while. We very nearly gave up. Oh my gosh, I can't read today. You were gone such a long while. We very nearly gave you up for lost, Nancy," George declared as the girl threw herself down into a comfortable chair. "Tired?" "Oh, a little, and my hand is hurting me again." "You haven't been to the doctor yet?" Bess questioned anxiously. "No, I'll probably see him this evening. I'm almost afraid of his verdict." "If you can't play in the tournament, it will be downright mean," Bess said feelingly. "Scores have been coming in all day, but the last we heard, you were still in the upper group." "There seems to be considerable gossip going the rounds about Mortimer Bartescue," George contributed. "He's playing in the men's tournament, and his qualifying score was one of the lowest turned in. Another player, the former state champion, practically accused him of cheating." "I wish I had refused to allow the man to attest my score," Nancy said with a frown. "His words seems to mean nothing." "Since he went away, he has telephoned twice," Bess remarked teasingly. "We told him you'd probably be back about 2 o'clock. "It's after that now, so he'll very likely be calling again, and I don't want to talk with him," Nancy sighed. "Let's go for a little walk." "It would be just our luck to encounter him," George replied. "Where could we go?" "I had in mind exploring the woods near the 16th fairway," Nancy answered quietly. "I'll not be satisfied until I've visited Sammy's haunted bridge." "Let's get started right away," George cried enthusiastically, looking about for her hat. "I think we shouldn't go there alone," Bess murmured nervously. "If the caddies are afraid." be a silly little goose, George said to her cousin. You know very well there are no ghosts. It's only a story, of course. Stories seldom originate out of nothing, Bess retorted feelingly. I'm just certain we'll get into trouble, but I suppose I'll have to go. Nancy and George merely laughed at her fears. By the time the girls reached the edge of the woods, Bess began to share their zest for the adventure. As I recall, this was the place where my ball entered the woods, Nancy pointed out after taking careful bearings. It bounced to the right of that big oak tree. She led the way into the gloomy woods, closely followed by her chums. I'd suspect that the bridge would be down by the ravine somewhere, George commented uneasily. I can see something white through the trees, Nancy replied, halting. Yes, I believe it must be the bridge. Maybe it's the ghost, Bess muttered under her breath. Nancy and George courageously pushed on through the dense tangle of underbrush, with Bess bringing up the rear. Let's go back to the hotel, she pleaded, but her friends did not hear her. By this time, the three girls were close enough to see the bridge, which was half screened by overhanging bushes. It was a sagging, old-fashioned structure, once white but now in need of both paint and repairs. Suddenly, Nancy, who was in the lead, abruptly halted, her attention held by something which lay just ahead. Bess gave a gasp of horror. The bridge is haunted, she cried. You can see the ghost moving slowly across it. The thing is waving its arms back and forth, just as Sammy claimed, George added, her courage rapidly ebbing away. Nancy, this is no place for us. Let's get out of here. Nonsense, George. I'm surprised at you. We came to investigate the haunted bridge, not to run away at the first suggestion of anything supernatural. Besides, I don't believe that white object can be anything so very dreadful. What do you think it is? Bess asked in a calmer tone. Certainly not a ghost. It might be a piece of white cloth fluttering in the breeze. It might be, Bess admitted in a frightened whisper. But did you ever hear a piece of cloth moan and groan? Just listen. I don't hear anything, Nancy began, and then the words died in her throat. From far down in the ravine, seemingly near the old haunted bridge, there issued a fearful cry which was like no human sound. Tortured and weird, it rose to a labored crescendo, and then, as if heavy with remorse for some dreadful sin, it faded away in a lingering wail into the dim recesses of the black forest. End of chapter 4. Whew. Anybody can be far from what they seem, Nancy. Yeah. I say that all the time. My house was destroyed by a fire is as commonplace as hello. Right? I've had entire read streams where I couldn't read. That made the stream a bit awkward. Ghosts, whatever. That ghost is having a fun time. It sure is. It sure is. Excuse me. Times. Welcome for clapping. I want to check something on Discord. I'm trying to think. Aww. Oops. I was gonna say, instead of Sims, we could maybe do Jackbox, but also, I need to look at the sale, the Steam sale again, because, The Jackbox 4 is on sale, and I don't have that one yet, so I might get it. So we could play Jackbox 4, although I have to download it. Terry, would you be up for some Jackbox? I don't know if HS is still here. She's probably at work, I'm assuming. But yeah. Okay. Well, I'm gonna go for maybe one more chapter, and then we'll see what to do by then. Okay. So chapter 5 is called Investigating the Ghost. We're at 131. Okay. For several minutes, the three girls huddled together, listening for the weird sound to be repeated. Through the screen of trees, they could still see the white, ghost-like object moving its arms slowly to and fro. "Let's go back to the hotel," Bess urged nervously. "I've lost all interest in the haunted bridge." "Well, I haven't," Nancy rejoined quickly. "Come on, girls, we'll approach very quietly and see if we can surprise the ghost." Bess pleaded with her chums to give up the adventure, but they paid not the slightest attention to her. Rather than be left behind, she reluctantly trailed them deeper into the woods. Nancy, who was in advance of the others, moved stealthily forward, taking care not to step on brittle sticks, nor to make any sound which would betray her presence. Suddenly she halted, and to the astonishment of Bess and George began to chuckle. "Girls, Sammy's so-called ghost is nothing but an old scarecrow." "A scarecrow?" Bess echoed incredulously. "See for yourself." Moving slightly aside, Nancy pointed toward the bridge directly below. Her chums were now close enough to it to observe a tattered white figure flapping back and forth in the breeze. "Well, did you ever?" George exclaimed. "I guess that was a good joke on us." No longer afraid, the girls hastened down into the ravine to examine the scarecrow. It had been set up at the entrance to the narrow, sagging bridge, though for what purpose they were unable to guess. Evidently, the figure had been standing out in the open many months, for the white clothing was grimy and torn, and straw stuffing protruded from the shirt bosom. The scarecrow was so wobbly that the slightest breeze or any vibration of the bridge caused it to move. From a distance, it was not surprising that the swaying motion of the arms seemed lifelike. "Well, I guess the mystery of the haunted bridge is solved," Bess said in relief. "How do you explain the groaning sound we heard?" George asked. "I'm certain we didn't imagine it." "No," Nancy answered gravely as she tested the bridge to see if it would bear her weight. "Those moans were very real, and we know they didn't come from this scarecrow either." "How do you account for it, Nancy?" Bess questioned nervously. "You don't suppose we heard the creaking of the bridge as it swayed in the wind?" Nancy shook her head. "Those sounds couldn't have been made that way, I'm sure." "It's barely possible some prankster may be at work around here," George suggested, gazing thoughtfully about her. Nancy held the same opinion. After the girls had searched the vicinity carefully, they were more bewildered than before, since there was no evidence the bridge had been visited lately. "There's not a soul here now," Nancy observed, "but of course we know some person must have set up the scarecrow. For what purpose, I wonder?" "There are no fruit trees nearby and no crops to protect," Bess commented. "It seems fairly obvious that someone wanted to keep folks from crossing the bridge." "Either that or else the scarecrow was set up for a joke," Nancy said slowly. "But still, we can't explain those moaning sounds. Shall we cross over to the other side of the ravine?" "The bridge doesn't look safe to me," Bess protested. "When you stepped on it a moment ago, it sagged dreadfully." "I think it will hold me," Nancy returned, but Bess and George would not permit her to make the test. "There's nothing to see on the other side anyway," Bess declared indifferently. "Let's look for your golf ball, Nancy." "That probably would be a more profitable occupation. I'd like to find that ball, for it was one of my best ones. Jimmy Harlow, the champion, autographed it for me." "Why would you use a ball that's been autographed? Why wouldn't you just display it?" Silly Nancy. Then by all means, let's search for it, George responded quickly. It should be here somewhere not far from the bridge. The girls poked about among the bushes for nearly 15 minutes. Though they found 2 water-soaked balls, they could not locate the one Nancy had lost. Maybe it rolled into the creek bed, Bess presently suggested. Nancy, who wore an old pair of shoes with spikes, scrambled down the muddy bank to search. It's terribly slippery, girls, so don't try to follow me, she warned. I doubt that the ball can be found here anyway, for it must be buried in mud. A brief search convinced Nancy that she was only ruining her shoes and stockings. Deciding to rejoin her companions who were watching from above, she walked along the creek's edge, looking for a place where the bank was not so steep. Suddenly her eye fell upon a metal object which was half buried in the thick mud. Is that your ball? George called eagerly. No, it's a piece of brass. I think I found an old plate. A brass plate? Bess exclaimed in wonder. Meanwhile, Nancy had pried up the object and saw that it was not a plate at all, but a tiny carved chest. The discovery was such an exciting one that for a moment she could only stare at the curious little brass container. It looks like a jewel case, she gasped, holding up the article so that Bess and George might see it. And it's very heavy. How did a thing like that get buried in the mud? George asked blankly. Nancy, you certainly were born lucky. You lose a golf ball and find a treasure chest. It feels heavy enough to contain gold, Nancy declared in satisfaction, turning the curious object over in her hands. She estimated that the little chest was not more than 6 inches in length. It appeared to be approximately 4 inches wide and slightly less in depth. Bess and George slipped down the muddy bank to join their chum. They were even more thrilled than she was over the strange discovery. Open it quickly, Bess urged. You may have found something valuable. The chest seems to be locked. Jerk the lid, Nancy, George advised. Maybe it's only stuck. Nancy attempted a second time to do so, but she could not open the mysterious little box. Let me try, George requested. She had no better success. It's locked, all right, Bess declared gloomily. Maybe we can smash the lid with a rock. Brass won't be easy to smash, Nancy replied. Besides, I don't want to ruin such an attractive little chest. It will be beautiful when it's cleaned and polished. But it's irritating not to know what it contains, George complained. What would you say is hidden inside, Nancy? I have no idea, of course, but it might be something valuable. The thing that interests me is, why was it secreted here by the haunted bridge, and by whom? Perhaps the creek washed it down from higher land, Bess suggested meditatively. The water evidently has been much higher than it is now. That's very possible, Nancy admitted. Still, it seems more reasonable to me that someone deliberately buried the chest, perhaps the same person who set up the scarecrow. Why do you think that? Asked George. Oh, it's only a vague theory. Certainly I have no evidence to support my belief. Well, it's too deep a mystery for me, Bess declared as the girls climbed out of the ravine with their treasure. If Nancy can find the answer to this riddle, she will be good. I mean to try at least, her chum replied with a gay laugh. Just now, my main ambition is to get this little chest to the hotel without being seen by anyone. Let's enter by the rear door. The three soon emerged from the woods. They met no one as they cut across the golf course, but as they approached Deer Mountain Hotel, they were observed by Mortimer Bardescu, who was sipping a cool drink under an umbrella table. He quickly arose and came toward the girls. Oh, that pest will be certain to see the chest and ask a million prying questions, Nancy murmured apprehensively. It was too late to avoid him. Bess was carrying an extra sweater. Thinking quickly, she carelessly tossed it over Nancy's arm so that the brass chest was concealed completely. Oh, hello, Bardescu greeted the girls as he came up to them. Have you been out on the golf course? We were looking for one of my favorite balls, Nancy returned politely. I lost it in the woods the last time I played. It's really too hot for golf today anyway, the man said, falling into step. May I carry your sweater, Miss Drew? Oh, no, Nancy answered in confusion. I'd rather have it swinging along on my arm. As she observed that he was gazing at her somewhat curiously, she added hastily, I believe I haven't thanked you for the beautiful flowers you sent to me. It was very thoughtful of you. You liked the roses? Fortescue beamed. I ordered the best I could get, but of course the florist shops here at Deer Mountain are not on a par with those of New York or the continent. Golf jokes. How are you feeling today, Miss Drew? Very well, except for my hand. One finger is still quite useless. You plan to play in the tournament regardless? Yes, if the doctor says I may, and providing that I qualify. Oh, haven't you heard? Fortescue inquired with a smile. Your score was one of the lowest turned in. You qualified easily for the first flight. I hoped I might, but I couldn't be certain until all of the scores were in. I assume you plan to compete in the men's tournament tomorrow? Oh yes, and I'm counting upon winning the cup, Mr. Bartescue announced confidently. I went out for a practice round this morning and shot a nice 69. 69? Bess echoed in amazement. I'm just coming into my game, the man boasted. I doubt if anyone will prove a match for me unless I take an unexpected slump. The girls found such outrageous bragging decidedly distasteful. Though they listened with a show of polite interest, they did not believe that Mr. Bartescue had ever made as low a score as he claimed. Nancy was still nervous, lest the man see the carved brass chest, which was hiding beneath the sweater. Won't you take tea with me? He invited, as the four reached the hotel entrance. He looked a trifle offended when Nancy declined. Well, at least he didn't see the brass chest. Bess chuckled as the girls gained the privacy of their bedrooms. I'm nearly eaten up with curiosity to learn what's inside. Nancy tried to pry open the metal box with a nail file, but the lid would not budge. Other tools at hand were equally worthless. We need something with a sharp point, George declared as she studied the little chest in deep perplexity. If only we had an ice pick or a nail. Nancy sprang to her feet, her eyes alight with excitement. I know what we can use, girls. Why didn't I think of it before? Without waiting to explain, she dropped the little chest into George's lap and ran from the room. End of chapter 5. I'm at work on mobile. It'd be difficult for me to do anything beyond watching. Oh, okay. Good old bridge scarecrow. Nancy thinks it being signed will make it better. Locks, Nancy's greatest enemy. Oh, you know what? I need to make that a sound effect. Scarecrows are the best at protecting chests. Finally, more Morty! 69. Yep. Bet he planned that out well. That guy, he's a sleazeball. Morty Barbecue. I really like that. Morty Barbecue. I'm gonna write that down. Morty Barbecue. Because that is what is happening here. Boop, 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 boop. Okay, well no one answered my thing, so guess that's a no. You guys are busy, so okay, no Jackbox. I guess I'll go ahead and get off, because I should probably work on stuff before I have to go. Let me see when my next stream is. I think Friday is what I have planned. But I do... Why am I looking on here? I don't know. It's fine. So I do have Indie Fam Sims planned for Friday at 1. So I guess I'll just stay on top of advertising that and then ask around and get my stuff organized for that. So, if you guys want to join me Friday at 1, Let me double check that that is still okay. Yes. We will be playing Indie Fam Sims. And maybe making some more characters. I gotta figure out how many people I have left, but yeah. So thank you guys for being here. Hope you enjoyed the first 5 chapters of The Haunted Bridge. I'm into it so far. My chat DC'd. 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 What do you mean DC'd? Delayed chapter 5 clap. Thank you. Disconnected. Gotcha. You're fine. I don't know what's happening. It's fine. Everything's fine. Anyways, thank you guys for being here. I hope to see you Friday. And other than that, I hope you have a good rest of your week. Happy Wednesday. Happy hump day. Have fun. Love ya. All that jazz. See you later. Bye.